Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and hi everyone. Today I would like to share an overview of the MUET listening paper as well as share some tips on how you can become effective listeners so that you can answer the MUET listening paper better. First of all, let us take a look at the test overview. Your MUET listening paper will consist of 5 parts with 7 listening texts in total in the form of a dialogue or a monologue. Part 1 will have 1 dialogue with 7 multiple choice questions of 3 options. Part 2 will have a monologue of 7 multiple choice questions of 3 options as well. Part 3 will have a monologue spoken by 3 different speakers on the same topic, and this is followed by 3 questions to be matched with 5 given options. So this type of question will be called multiple matching. Part 4 will have a dialogue with 7 multiple choice questions of 3 options again. And in the last part, which is part 5, you are going to listen to 3 unrelated dialogues, each of which is followed by 2 multiple choice questions of 3 options. So, in total, you have to answer 30 questions within 50 minutes. You will be given 15 to 30 seconds to go through the questions before each listening text is played, and the listening text will be played twice. Before you can tackle the paper, you have to know why some listeners might be having difficulty while doing listening. It is hoped that if we can identify the problems, we can find ways to overcome them. Well, according to Underwood, 1989, some of the difficulties listeners would go through in the listening skill would be, first, listeners cannot control the speed of delivery. Second, listeners cannot have words repeated. Third, most often, listeners have a limited vocabulary, and they sometimes encounter an unknown word, which may cause them to stop and think about the meaning of that word, therefore causing them to miss the next part of the speech. Fourth, listeners fail to recognize the signals which would indicate that the speaker is moving from one point to another, or the speaker is giving an example, or the speaker is even repeating a point. Fifth, listeners may lack contextual knowledge, which could lead to misinterpretation, unless the listeners are familiar with the context. 6. Can be difficult for listeners to concentrate, especially if the topic of the listening passage is not to their liking, because even the shortest break in attention can seriously impair comprehension. And last, students may have already established certain learning habits, such as they believe that they need to understand every word heard. And as a result, students tend to become worried if they fail to understand a particular word or phrase. And, of course, they will be discouraged by failure. So, these are some difficulties that listeners might encounter while doing listening activities or tests. Since we have identified the problems, let us find ways to improve our listening skills. And to improve the skills, we need to learn, first of all, to become effective listeners. And in order for us to become effective listeners, we have to develop effective listening skills. And if we want to understand the conversation, we also have to understand the language functions. We also need to understand idiomatic expressions and colloquialisms used. And of course, we need to be able to identify the usage or even recognize the usage of linking words. Let us take a look at the first way, that is developing effective listening skills. Now, in order for you to develop effective listening skills, you have to train yourself to listen for the main ideas. Listen for specific information. You also need to train yourself to be able to listen and identify details, as well as when you listen, you should be able to distinguish relevant information from the irrelevant. So when you listen for main ideas, what you need to do would be to find the central thought or the issue or argument in the text, whether they are stated or implied. Try to exclude details or examples, and try to always ask yourself what the recording is all about. Okay. Meanwhile, when you listen for specific information, what you are actually doing is intensive listening, where you have to pay particular attention to certain words or phrases to recall specific information. And these specific information may include names, places, as well as numerical information, which would include dates, times, and numbers. Next, when you listen, you have to train yourself to be able to identify details. Now, the details often follow or support a main point, but you have to always remember that you are not always going to hear the exact words that you are going to find in the questions. So listen for similar words and phrases that would describe the information you are looking for. That is why you have got to read a lot, because you need to increase your vocabulary. Okay? And of course, the ability to be able to distinguish the relevant from the irrelevant information. Okay? This is where you have got to determine which information is linked to the subject and issue. If you cannot make the connection between the information and the subject, then it is probably irrelevant. Try to look for points related to the subject or issue. You might be listening to a lot of information, which is not important to the topic discussed. Thus, it is important for you to determine which information is relevant. Okay, next. All right, now. As language is used to express our daily interactions, okay, therefore it is vital for everyone to understand the expressions or phrases used by others in order for us to follow any conversation. Now, some of the language functions highlighted here are expressions or phrases used when you want to handle information, expressions or phrases when you want to express emotion or when someone wants to express emotions, okay, expressions or phrases when people share emotions, expressions and phrases when people socialized, as well as expressions and phrases when people cope with conversation. So it is hoped that when you hear some of these expressions, you would be able to understand and follow the conversation. Okay, so these are some expressions or phrases when people want to handle information. Okay, so you can go through this on your own. Meanwhile, these would be examples of expressions or phrases when people express emotions. These would be expressions or phrases when people want to share emotions. Meanwhile, these would be examples of expressions or phrases when people socialized. And these would be examples of expressions or phrases when people cope with conversation. Okay, now you have to remember, normally in conversations, people normally don't only use expressions or phrases that we have discovered just now. They would also add in idiomatic expressions as well as colloquialisms. So again, you have to understand the meaning when people use idiomatic expressions as well as colloquialisms. So for your information, idiomatic expressions are groups of words with an established meaning unrelated to the meanings of the individual words. So you can go through this on your own. These would be examples of colloquialism, which would refer to an informal expression that is more often used in casual conversation than in formal speech or writing. And of course, in order for you to be able to follow any conversation, you need to be able to identify and recognize the linking words used. This is because linking words are used to indicate when the speaker is moving from one point to the next, or when the speaker would like to introduce a new point, or when the speaker tries to explain the point, or when the speaker tries to wind up a point. Linking words would also help you to anticipate what the speaker might say next. All right, you can see in the table, all right, linking words related to introducing a new point, linking words to explain more points, linking words to illustrate a point or to give an example, linking words to talk about another side of the issue, as well as linking words to sum up a point. Okay, now only you are ready to sit for the exam. So let us take a look at the exam techniques. What are some of the things that you need to do? Well, first of all, please skim through all the questions and the answer options to get a general idea of the text that you are going to listen to. At the same time, please do not forget to read the rubrics because they are going to give information on the settings and context. Underline the keywords in the questions so that you know what to listen to later. Listen for the specific information you need to answer. Pay attention to the content and the flow of ideas or information as delivered by the speaker. Carefully check each possible option. Remember that some of the most likely answers may be paraphrased. Choose the most suitable answer to the question. And if you are unable to answer a question, attempt it again during the second listening of the text. Meanwhile, some of the do's and don'ts while you are doing the listening test, okay, or while you are answering the MUET listening paper. So some of the do's, please concentrate and listen attentively. Read and listen to the instructions. Read ahead to be prepared. Use the pause to check your answers. Please don't get distracted. Don't spend too much time on one question. And please do not panic if you miss a question, since just try to continue with the next question as you can return to the missed one later. And please do not leave any question unanswered. So that's it from me. Okay. I hope that you find the information shared here useful. Meanwhile, my other colleagues are going to be discussing questions for MUET listening according to its part in other videos. So try to apply what you have learned here to help you answer the questions. So all the best in the MUET listening paper. Bye.